on earth did you want to turn off for Dilmouth?
I like the sound of it. Anyway, I've hardly seen the sea yet.
Going for a paddle, Gwenda?
I might very well. Don't be superior. It's all new to me, darling. That's what you don't understand. Look.
What?
Just stop. I've got to take a look at that.
What?
That house.
Gwenda, what on earth would you do with a vast place like that?
Live in it. It's just what I want. What I've always dreamed of. And the agents are in Dilmouth. See, I was right to come.
Darling, you can't buy a house in Dilmouth when you're just married. People retire to Dilmouth.
Well, I'm just an ignorant New Zealander. I can do what I want. Galbraith and Penderley in 4th Street.
Well, all right, if that's what you want, but it's the last house we see today.
It might be the last house we're going to see, but that's all.
It seems rather large. Is it 7 bedrooms?
6. In my opinion, the 7th is a dressing room.
It's a lovely big room, Mrs. Hangrave. But you can't see the sea.
Are you a Devon man, Mr. Reed?
Yes, I was born in Plymouth, but my wife has never been to England before. I just flew back last week, after 3 years in New Zealand.
On business?
Yes, the Meat Marketing Board.
My husband was with the bank.
Really?
And secretary of the golf club. He was very much attached to Dilmouth.
Linen cupboards here. Is this the bathroom? Oh, yes, it is. With a mahogany surround. Oh, Giles, look, isn't that wonderful?
It's quite old-fashioned, but my husband wouldn't change it.
Oh, I really love it. I can just see celluloid ducks in a bath like that.
I think you mean plastic, Gwenda.
It was celluloid when I was little. And then there must be another bedroom here. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Hangrave. It's just that I feel so at home here. Now, this is the room for me. And there's the sea.
What's wrong?
I don't know. It's like vertigo. Someone on my grave. This house isn't haunted, is it?
I never heard so.
But someone died here.
My husband died in St. Monica's nursing home.
Of course, you told us. I'm ever so sorry.
In a house of this age, there must have been some deaths. Miss Elworthy, from whom we purchased it 7 years ago, was in excellent health. She went abroad to do missionary work. And now I expect you'll want to see the garden. We have a man who comes twice a week, but it's so difficult to get people since the war, and he's not exactly reliable. Oh, dear. Excuse me.
Yes, of course. Do you think it's someone else wanting to view?
Well, I doubt it. The price is pretty steep.
Well, that Forsythia will have to go. It completely blocks the view. Anyway, there should be steps here down to the lawn.
Steps? Gwenda, I thought this place gave you the creeps.
Oh, that was just silly. I really want it, Giles. Aunt Mary's furniture will be perfect.
It's 500 over the top.
Make an offer then. Do a brutal deal with Galbraith and Penderley and feel happy. get up.
Why?
Just because you're a man of leisure for the next 2 months.
Moving into this house is the hardest work I've ever done in my life.
And the workmen will be here, and Mrs. Cocker. She said something yesterday about the devil and idle hands, and I think she meant you. Hi, Mrs. Cocker.
They make a powerful lot of dust, they workmen.
Yes, I know. I found this to cover the table in the dining room. It's quite valuable.
Not a bit too soon, in my opinion, madam.
I'll do it now, then. Oh dear. How silly of me. I always think there's a door through here.
Well, 'twould save a tidy bit of trouble, madam, to have a door there.
Do you think so? I'll have a word with Mr. Sims about it. If you could put this on the table for me, I'll take this up to my husband and get his breakfast.
Very well, madam.
It's from Raymond West.
Who?
Raymond West, my cousin in town, the writer. I told you about him.
Oh, yes. What does he want?
Wants us to spend a few days with them in London. He says he and Jen are dying to meet you and show you around.
Oh, no, Giles.
Oh, Gwenda, why not? They're perfectly harmless. It might be an idea for us to have a break. And there are 1 or 2 things I should do in town. Why don't you want to go?
There's too much to do here. You know it'll be chaos.
Darling, it'll be chaos anyway. Why don't we let Sims and Mrs. Cocker fight it out while we take a break?
No. You go if you want, darling. It's you they want to see after all these years. I'll stay here.
You'll be lonely.
Don't be too sure. I might have a mad affair with Reg.
Reg?
He's the mason.
Is he now?
Looks like you're going back to old times, miss.
Old times?
Yeah. Come across the old steps, see? Just like you want 'em now. When someone planted over and covered 'em up.
That was silly of them. You want a view here down to the lawn and the sea.
Yes, and they shrubs will make it dark in the house, too. Still, they was growing a treat. Well, for Scythia ain't much. But they wigulars. They cost money.
Oh, but this is much nicer.
Yeah, well, maybe it is.
Mr. Foster? Who lived here before the Hengraves? They didn't stay in this house very long.
No, a matter of 6 years or so. And before them, the Miss Ellsworthys, churchy folk, missions to the heathen. Who was it before that? Oh, yes, I know. Mrs. Findison. Proper gentry she was. Planted most of this garden before I were born.
Did she die here?
No, died out in Egypt or some such place. But they brought her home here and she buried in the churchyard there. When none of they new houses built up along then. Changes.
Well, I suppose there have to be changes. Improvements.
Well, I don't see any. That used to be the cottage hospital down there, nice and handy. And then they goes and builds that new place a mile out of town. Changes all the time. Now, what's the good of that? You can't do no proper planting if you don't plan ahead.
What do you fancy, Mrs. Reed? We got a nice candy stripe. We do a lot of that. 1 or 2 walls and a matching emulsion.
Oh, I don't know, Mr. Sims.
It's contemporary. This won't be your room, I take it. Well, not when the other's been decorated.
I do like this room.
Been the nursery at one time, I fancy.
What?
Bars on the windows. Still.
I know what I want. I want a wallpaper with bunches of tiny scarlet poppies and something else. Yes, poppies and bunches of blue cornflowers. To match this, a white background and bunches of red and blue flowers.
Oh, Mrs. Reed.
Oh, and another thing. This is stuck. Even my husband couldn't get it open. Do you think?
Been painted over a good few times. My carpenter will see to that. The redecorating will take care of any damage.
And it won't alter the estimate, Mr. Sims, because my husband...
Oh, bless us now. Got some good news for you on that score, as it happens, Mrs. Reed.
You have?
That door downstairs to the dining room you said you wanted. Well, Red scraped some plaster away. He said there's been a door there before.
There was a door.
Simplest thing in the world to put it back. So that'll take a few pounds off what I quoted you.
I knew there was a door.
Common sense, really. But that wallpaper you were talking about, cornflowers and poppies or something. I'll take a good look through the samples, but I can't call them out everything
I can just see celluloid ducts in a bath like that.
I think you mean plastic.
That door downstairs to the dining room that you said you wanted. Well, Red scraped some plaster away. He said there's been a door there before.
Like you're going back to old times, miss.
Old times?
Yeah, come across the old steps. Just like you want them now.
Been the nursery at one time, I fancy. Been painted over a good few times. My carpenter will see to that. The redecorating will take care of any damage.
I want a wallpaper with bunches of tiny scarlet poppies and bunches of blue cornflowers.
Hello? Hello?
Giles,
Are you all right, darling?
are you in London?
Yes, I'm calling from the West. Look, Gwenda, they really would love you to come down just for a few days. Are you there? Gwenda?
Yes. I'm here.
Hop on a train and I'll see you at Paddington tomorrow. What do you say?
Yes. Yes, I will.
Splendid. Raymond and Joan will be chuffed. And there's someone they would like you to meet.
And here she is, Aunt Jane. This is Giles' wife, Gwenda.
How do you do, Miss Marple?
Oh, how do you do?
Do sit down.
What an unusual name.
It's Welsh. My mother was Welsh.
Oh, but I thought Joan told me that you came from New Zealand.
My mother died when I was born. We were living in India, so my father sent me out to New Zealand to live with relatives. It wasn't long before he died himself.
Oh, dear me, yes, such a treacherous climate. I know one or two old India hands in St. Mary Mead. That's my village.
Aunt Jane's something of a local celebrity.
Oh, dear boy.
She solves puzzles, and not the ones in the Times.
Well, I'm very fond of the crossword.
What sort of puzzles, Miss Marple?
Oh,
Very murky puzzles, Giles. The things that happen in an English village would utterly amaze you.
Which is why I suppose you spend so much time there, Raymond.
Yes, my angel. The ambience suits me to perfection. Under the thatch of the lilacs and Darjeeling, dark passions stir. Here in simple, uninhibited London, we need the arts to jazz things up. Which reminds me, We're taking you all to the court tonight.
Oh, the court?
It's a theatre, darling.
Oh, thank goodness.
More of the dark passions, actually. The Duchess of Malfi. Where's the jam?
Alas, how have these offended?
The death of young wolves is never to be pitied.
Fix your eyes here.
Constantly.
Do you not weep? Other sins only speak. Murder shrieks out. The element of water moistens the earth, but blood flies up and bedews the heavens.
Cover her face. Mine eyes dazzle. She died young.
I think not so. Her infelicity seemed to have years too many.
She and I were twins. And should I die this instant, I had lived her time to a minute.
It seems she was born first. You have bloodily approved the ancient truth that kindred commonly do worse agree than remote strangers.
Let me see her face again.
How do I know why she screamed?
Well, Webster was much possessed by death, of course.
Oh, well done, Raymond.
Personally, I loathe Jacobean drama. I suppose it was the shock.
Oh, I think we shall find it something much more than that, Joe.
I must apologise. Gwenda's very sorry, and so am I. She's gone to bed.
Oh, how is she, poor dear?
Well, she's still very shaken. I don't quite know what to do. It's all rather a muddle, like one of your puzzles, Miss Marple. I don't think I should leave her alone too long.
No, no. Well, I wonder. Well, I don't like to interfere, but do you think I might possibly speak to her?
That would be very kind. Yes, she'd like that.
Oh, good. Yes, well, then I'll go up, shall I?
I'm pouring drinks, Aunt Jane. What do you want?
Cocoa would be very nice. And hot sweet tea for Gwenda, and lots of hot water bottles. Thank you.
You know the room?
Have we any cocoa?
Or hot water bottles? Dear Aunt Jane.
Whiskey we have, and you deserve a large one.
Thanks. Gwenda's still very upset.
Well, I think I'm going mad. I must be going mad. All those things that happened in the house, in Hillside, and then tonight.
Yes.
It happened quite suddenly. I was enjoying the play, not thinking about the house or anything. And then he said those words, the Duke. Cover her face. Mine eyes dazzle. She died young. And I was there, on the stairs at Hillside, looking down through the banisters. And I saw her lying there, her hair all golden, and her face. She was strangled. There was a man. I saw his hands. They were grey, wrinkled like monkey's paws. She was dead.
Who was dead?
Helen. Why did I say that? I don't know any Helen. You see, I'm mad. I ought to see a psychiatrist at once, unless it's too late.
Well, you can always do that when you wish, but I think it's better to examine the simplest explanation first. Now, you say that several things about this house seem familiar. Is that right?
Yes.
Well, then, the easiest and most natural explanation is that you've seen them before.
In another life, you mean?
No, dear, no. I mean in this life.
But I've never been in England until 6 weeks ago. My father sent me straight from India to New Zealand.
And do you remember that? You remember the voyage to New Zealand?
No.
Well, then, I think it's quite possible that you came to England for a time and actually lived at Hillside, and the room that you remember was probably your nursery.
It was a nursery. There are bars on the window. But that's impossible.
No, not impossible. Just a remarkable coincidence. And in life, coincidences do happen. Remember, you chose the house, and you had no revulsion of feelings until that very definite moment when you started to come downstairs and looked into the hall.
Then that's true as well. I mean, Helen?
Well, dear, I think we have to face the facts that if those were memories, this is a memory too. Remember, you told me you saw the body through the banisters, just as you would have done, standing on the stairs as a little child.
I must speak to Aunt Alison.
In New Zealand?
She'll know.
Oh, good morning, Miss Marple. Am I disturbing you?
Oh, my dear boy, of course not. No, not in the least.
Gwenda's just coming down. She had breakfast on a tray. It was pretty late before we got to bed last night.
Oh, and was Gwenda able to get in touch with her relations in New Zealand?
I don't think Aunt Alison quite realised it was the middle of the night here. But what you said to Gwenda was quite true. It seems her father took her to England after her mother's death, and on the way over he met a young woman on the boat and married her in London.
Oh, a stepmother. And did Aunt Alison recall her name?
I gather she walked out on him quite soon. That's why Gwenda was sent to New Zealand. But Aunt Alison did remember one thing. They had a house in Devonshire. Dartmouth she thought it was, but it could have been Dilmouth. So that all fits.
And did Gwenda explain to Aunt Alison why she was making all these inquiries?
She said something about having a strong feeling she'd been in England before, but the line wasn't too hot.
And Aunt Alison seems to have left one or two things unsaid in the past to Gwenda.
Obviously it wasn't a happy marriage. I suppose she thought it best forgotten.
Oh, there you are, my dear.
Good morning, Miss Marple. Raymond's battering his typewriter, but where's Joan?
In the studio.
Has Giles told you all the news? And how brilliant you are?
Oh.
We just couldn't get to sleep. It seemed to explain so much, and then so much it didn't.
Ah, yes, that's true now.
We've got to find out, of course.
Find out what?
The truth. Who was Helen? And was she really murdered? I've got to know.
Oh, my dear, I do advise you. I do advise you most strongly not to do that.
Why? I expect it's all imagination, but Gwenda won't be happy until she knows.
Giles is right, Miss Marple. I've got to see it through. Don't you understand?
Oh, yes, of course I understand, because you're both so young and charming, and you're just beginning. And you simply can't imagine anything. Yes, I was thinking of Freddie Lovelace. He was dairyman at Home Farm, and his mother had apparently once won first prize for chrysanthemums. Oh, long before Freddie was born. Quite a triumph for her. And when she died, he tried to find the certificate to have it framed. He was so proud of her, you see. It was a grave mistake.
Why? It turned out she hadn't won?
Oh, no, my dear. It turned out she wasn't his mother. All I'm saying is that I wish, oh, I do so wish, that you'd leave the past alone.
Was it here?
A bit nearer the stairs. I think it must be true. What Miss Marple said of me.
And you can't remember anything else here in the hall?
Just Helen.
Well, no one in Dilmouth seems to know anything, so it can't have been a murder. The parish registry of deaths wasn't much help.
What idiots. You know who we should ask?
Who?
The land agents. My father must have bought this house, or at least rented it.
Of course. Galbraith and Penderley.
Was a Halley day. My prep school, Yorkshire. That's 70 years ago. Good God, why come to me? I'm an old man. Retired years ago.
We thought perhaps you might remember Mr. Galbraith, because my father came here from India, And Mr. Penderley said you were out there in the First World War?
India, do you say?
We think Gwenda's father might have rented Hillside.
Yeah, was it called Hillside then? Was it, chap? Young wife and a baby. Little girl.
That was me.
You don't say so. Well, well. Now, what was his name?
Halliday.
That's right, my dear. Nice fellow. Very pretty wife. Young, fair-haired. Wanted to be near her people or something like that. Yes, very pretty.
Who were her people?
No idea. No idea at all, my dear. Didn't look like you.
No, well...
St. Catherine's. Yes, that's what the place was called. He took St. Catherine's at 8 guineas a week. While Mrs. Finderson was out in Egypt. Didn't she run off with someone, that young girl, Halliday's wife?
We thought you might tell us.
Oh, I don't know, my dear. It's a devil of a long time ago, anyway. You can tell Beryl I want my drink.
I didn't dream it then. So, the stepmother was young, and she had fair hair. But we still don't know her name.
We didn't. This is from Raymond. I asked him to make a cheque for me at Somerset House.
What's Somerset House?
The Registry of Births, Deaths and Marriages. Yes, here it is. A duplicate of your father's certificate. Kensington Registry Office, August 7th.
Kelvin James Halliday to Helen Spenlove Kennedy.
But it can't have been her you saw. Galbraith said she went away.
How do we know? How do we know she went away? Miss Marple? I thought it was you.
Well, my dear, quite a surprise to you, I'm sure.
What are you doing here?
Well, my doctor ordered me to the seaside for a change, and you always told me how attractive Domus was, and I have a friend who had a cook who now takes boarders on the front, so I came here.
Well, why didn't you come and see us?
Oh, I think the old person is rather a nuisance to a young married couple.
No, not you.
Well, it would have made me welcome, I'm sure. Well, now, how are you both getting on? To tell you the truth, I was thinking of you only a moment ago.
You were?
Yes. I've been studying the local newspaper. Always a source of information.
Ah. Then you've seen our advertisement. I'm afraid we haven't altogether taken your advice.
Well, good advice is almost certain to be ignored, but that's no reason for not giving it. Now, I always find the personal so intriguing. Will anyone with a knowledge of Helen Spenlove Halliday, née Kennedy, etc., etc. So it was Helen.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Well, you must forgive me if I seem concerned, but my life has so few excitements. And I know you won't think me inquisitive if I asked you to let me know how you're getting on.
No, of course not. If it wasn't for you, I'd probably been a loony bin. No, we'll tell you everything. And you must come to afternoon tea and see the house. We've put the advertisement in the Times as well. So we're bound to get some answers, don't you think?
Yes. I think so. I do think so, my dear.
Galls Hill, Woodley Bolton. Dear Sir, in answer to your advertisement in the Times, Helen Spenlove Kennedy is my sister. I've lost touch with her for many years and should be glad to have news of her. Yours faithfully, James Kennedy, MD. Good Lord. You don't mean to tell me you're Gwenny?
Yes, I'm Gwenny.
This goes for some ceremony. We must have tea. Please sit down.
Thank you.
So, you've bought the house in Dilmouth, have you?
Yes, it's quite a strange coincidence. We bought Hillside.
I believe you told me on the phone.
It was for sale, you see. It's the same house my father had all those years ago.
Hillside? Oh, but surely.
They changed the name, I think, just before the war.
I got the right place. On the Leahampton Road as you go down into the town.
Yes, it used to be called St. Catherine's.
Of course. Ah, Mrs. Rowe, we thought we'd have some tea, some cakes, or some hot buttered toast, or something. I don't usually go in for tea. What made you want to come back to St. Catherine's? You can't remember much about it, surely.
No, very little. But somehow it felt like home.
It felt like home.
So, I hoped you could tell me all about it. My father and Helen. Well, everything.
Well, there's not much. Helen was coming back from India. She met your father on the boat. He'd lost his wife, fell in love with her, and she felt sorry for him. And there you are. It's hard to know how these things happen. But they married in London, and then they came down to me. I was in practice in Dilmouth then. He's a nice fellow, Kelvin. A bit nervy and run down, but they were very happy together then. However, in less than a year, she ran away with someone else. You probably know about that.
Who did she run away with?
Well, she didn't tell me. I wasn't in her confidence. But I couldn't help seeing there was some friction between her and Kelvin. She didn't want me to know what was going on. I wouldn't have approved. They often had people to stay with them. I always imagined it was one of them.
There wasn't a divorce then?
Oh, no. Helen didn't want a divorce. Kelvin told me that. That's why I imagined, perhaps wrongly, it was a case of some married man. Someone whose wife was a Catholic, perhaps.
And my father?
He didn't want a divorce either.
Why did he suddenly decide to send me to New Zealand?
Well, I gather your people out there were pressing him, and after the breakup of the marriage...
But why didn't he take me himself?
I don't know. He was in rather poor health at the time.
But what did he die of?
I'm afraid I don't remember all the details. As I say, he was in poor health, and he went to a sanatorium somewhere on the East Coast, and he died there about 2 years later.
Where was it exactly?
I'm sorry. I don't remember.
Can you tell us where he was buried?
You know, I don't think we should dwell on the past. It was all such a long time ago, and we rather lost touch when he left Dilmouth. I've no idea at all where your father is buried.
That's strange.
Well, not really. Helen was the link. I was always very fond of Helen, tried to take care of her. She was my half-sister, you know, much younger than I was. She got involved early on with the most unsuitable young man, and I took care of that. And then she elected to go to India to marry Walter Fane, son of Dilmouth's leading solicitor, and frankly, as dull as dishwater. When she reached Bombay and saw him again, it was all off. And then, well, she met your father coming home. You see what I mean? I was always worried about Helen. Do you know where she is at all? I'd like to get in touch with her again.
No. No, we don't know at all. That's one of the reasons we came to see you.
Oh, but I thought from your advertisement. So tell me, why did you advertise?
We were hoping. We thought someone who knew her might be able to tell me something about my father.
Well, yeah. Well, now, I'm sorry. That's all I know.
What did you make of it?
I think it's hiding something. I wish we'd never started this.
Jim, look what I found here in the paper. I almost strained the chips onto it. Will anyone with a knowledge of Ellen Spenlow Halliday, née Kennedy, communicate with Messrs. Newman? Well, that's Mrs. Halliday I was in service with at Dilmouth. Her name was Ellen, right enough, and she was sister to Dr. Kennedy and was cured my chilblains. You think there's any money in it? Might be a will or something. It's a powerful long time ago. You don't think it could be police, do you, Jim?
Whatever.
Well, you know what I always thought. And I said it to Edie, but she wouldn't have it. And I'd have said a tidy bit more at the time. Only I nipped out the pictures that night, and I didn't want to draw attention to it. No, 'twouldn't likely be police, not after all this time. But it doesn't say to your advantage. Do you think I should, Jim?
Not if I was you, Lily.
Why ever not?
Only leads to trouble, that sort of thing. When's supper ready?
I'll answer, darling. Hello?
Mr. Reed, it's Dr. Kennedy here.
Hello, Dr. Kennedy.
I was thinking of our talk this afternoon. There are one or two things I think you and your wife ought to know.
Seems odd to be here again. Well, now, I take it you're still determined to find the sanatorium where your father died.
Yes, yes, we are.
Well, that should be easy enough for you, I imagine, after what I've told you.
Shall we sit down?
Thank you. So, I thought it better if you heard the facts from me. It won't do you or anybody any good, Gwenny. But there it is. No, thank you. Your father wasn't physically ill. The sanatorium in question was a mental home.
A mental home? You mean he was mad?
He had a very severe mental breakdown. He was suffering from delusional obsessions.
What kind of delusions?
He was under the impression that he'd strangled his wife.
Strangled? And had he?
What? No, of course he hadn't.
How do you know?
My dear girl, there was never any question of such a thing. He'd been in a very unbalanced state for some time, and the shock when Helen left him sent him over the edge. If a man would rather his wife was dead than unfaithful, he can persuade himself of anything, even that he killed her.
So you're quite sure there's no question that he actually did what he said?
Oh, quite sure. I'd had 2 letters from Helen. One when she went away after a week to France, and another about 6 months later. No, the whole thing was a delusion, pure and simple.
Can you tell us about it?
I tried to. He'd been having dreams, and the dreams always ended up in the same way, with throttling Helen. Well, it all came to a head one evening after I got back from the hospital. It was a Friday, I remember. Kelvin was waiting for me in my consulting room. He'd been there about a quarter of an hour. And when I came in, he looked up at me and he said, "I've killed Helen." Well, I didn't know what to think, so I said, "Have you had another dream?" He said, No. It's true. She's lying there, strangled." Well, he seemed very cool and reasonable. So I got the car out again and took him back to the house. It was quiet and dark, I remember. We went up to the bedroom.
The bedroom?
Yes, of course, that's where it happened. Of course, when we got in, there was nothing disturbed. The whole thing was an hallucination.
What did my father say?
He persisted in his story, of course. So I gave him a sedative and put him to bed in the dressing room. I found a note in a waste paper basket in here. It said, "Going away with the only man I've ever loved." Clearly, he'd come in and read it.
and experienced a severe attack of hysterical amnesia. That's all.
He wasn't alone that night in the house.
Oh, no, of course, you were tucked up in bed, but I questioned the housemaid. I took her upstairs into Helen's room. We went through her things. She'd packed a suitcase and a bag before she went away. So, the next morning, I talked to Kelvin, and he agreed to go into a nursing home. Well, Helen's letter came from Berlitz. She said she didn't want a divorce, and she hoped that Kelvin would forget her as soon as possible. He went into the private mental home, and that's where he died.
And you got another letter from Helen?
Oh, yes. Postal restaurant from Florence. She said if Kelvin wanted a divorce, she'd let him have the evidence. Well, I showed it to him, and he said at once that he didn't. So I wrote and told her. And that's the very last I ever heard. Of course, the war blotted out many things. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, Granny. But you had to know.
Aunt Alison never breathed a word.
No. No, she never did. I knew all the time.
We still can't be sure.
I knew it was Helen. I saw she was strangled.
But Gwenda, there was no body. Your father was mistaken. You could have been mistaken, too.
No, Giles.
Listen, Gwenda, it's the only thing that makes any sense. Supposing he came in and found her writing the note. Suppose he saw red, grabbed a hold of her, he got his hands round her throat, and well, that's what you saw.
And then what?
Well, and then she passed out. He thought he'd killed her, rushed off to get Dr. Kennedy, and, well, meantime, she recovers or her lover turns up.
No, it's impossible. I know she was dead. Like a dog that throws back its head and howls.
Hello?
Oh, Dad.
What's she doing here?
I forgot to tell you, I invited her to afternoon tea.
Oh, Gwenda.
Come on, we've got to go through with it.
All right, if you say so, darling.
Oh, hello?
Hello, Miss Marple. How are you enjoying Dilmouth?
Oh, very much. Yes, I have friends who have friends here, and I've received a number of pleasant invitations.
That's nice.
Yes, indeed. Oh, what a beautiful spot. Well, I do so hope that you've settled in by now.
Well,
The fact is, Miss Marple, we've just had a visitor. And rather a shock for me.
Well, my dears, I do see what you mean.
It's what you thought in London, isn't it? I mean, you thought then that my father might be involved.
Well, it occurred to me as a possibility. In a case of strangling, it's so often the husband who is involved.
I wish now we'd taken your advice. But once you've started, you can't go back.
No. However dangerous the journey, you can't turn back.
well, I don't see how we can go forward. Nothing makes any sense.
Well, there's always the possibility of X.
X?
X?
The unknown factor. Someone who hasn't appeared yet, but whose presence behind the facts can be deduced. A lover, perhaps. Someone who posted those letters from abroad other than Helen. Of course, you're both too young to remember the case of Dr. Crippen when something similar occurred.
We've got to visit the place where my father died. Perhaps we'll find something there.
Quite well, Mrs. Reed. No, I wasn't in charge of the case. That was Dr. Maguire, who was superintendent then, and I was his junior. Would you like to come in?
Thank you, Dr. Penrose.
Thank you.
I had Dr. Kennedy's letter. I've been going through the notes of your father's case history. Some very unusual features, most interesting.
I'm afraid I really know very little about my father, Dr. Penrose.
We hoped you'd tell us as much as you can.
Yes. Remarkable obsession, believing he'd strangled his wife in a fit of jealous rage. The delusion itself wasn't untypical. And what was lacking was the accompanying evidence of psychotic symptoms. What I mean is, Mrs. Reed, he wasn't mad, or didn't appear so.
How would you describe my father, Dr. Penrose?
Very convincing. Gentle, kindly, over-controlled. Quite frankly, at first I was inclined to believe him.
You actually believed he killed his wife?
I said at first. Later, as we got deeper into Major Halliday's history, we diagnosed it as a delusional neurosis, with roots far back into his childhood. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to complete his analysis. You knew, I suppose, he committed suicide.
No.
No, we didn't know that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you'd been told. We admitted some responsibility. He'd been prescribed sleeping tablets before his admission. Clearly, he was pretending to take the nightly dose until he had sufficient.
Was he so unhappy?
Oh, no. It was guilt, not depression. He tried at first, you know, to call the police. A normal desire for punishment. I remember he told me that he thought at one time his wife was secretly giving him drugs. Probably related to his days in India. Cases of women driving their husbands mad with datura poisoning often appeared in the native courts. Here's a typical interview. Dr. Maguire's notes, your father speaking. Came into the house, everything dark. Went into dining room as usual, poured drink. Then went through to drawing room. And then he said he remembers nothing, till standing in bedroom looking down at Helen, strangled. He knew he'd done it.
How did he know?
Question, do you remember killing her? Answer, no. Then how do you know? Answer, because she's dead. Same pattern, over and over again. Impossible to convince him. Oh, he left this diary, by the way. Suppose you might like to have it. It's not especially important to the record, medically speaking. Would you like to have it, Mrs. Reed?
Yes. Yes, I should like that very much.
What's true? I've written to James Kennedy. Let Helen come to see me if she's alive. He says he doesn't know where she is, but I'm not deceived. He's a good fellow, and he knows I killed her. After all the dreams, the nightmares, because I always knew from the very first that there was someone else.
There's always the possibility of X, the unknown factor. Someone who hasn't appeared yet, but whose presence behind the facts can be deduced. A lover, perhaps.
Once you've started, you can't go back.
No. However dangerous the journey, you can't turn back.
This is the only way. For me, and for little Gwenny. I always knew that there was someone else.
What is it?
It's the diary my father kept when he was in the sanatorium. It just confirms what Dr. Penrose told us, that my father killed himself because he believed he'd strangled Helen. But I'd like you to read it.
Thank you, my dear.
Only I don't believe he killed her. I only know what I remember. Standing as a child at the top of the stairs and seeing a man with hands like monkey's paws round a young girl's throat. And that was true. We know it was true now. I only want to prove one thing. That my father wasn't mad and he didn't kill her.
Have you had any response to your advertisement in the local newspaper?
No, not yet. It's not going to be easy.
No, no. Not after 20 years of what one might call sleeping murder. You say that your father thought that Helen was giving him drugs to confuse his mind?
Yes, but Dr. Penrose didn't believe that. He said my father only thought it because it's something wives did to their husbands in India with some kind of native poison.
And then there are the letters that Helen wrote.
Oh, what letters?
I've got the things just here, actually. Dr. Kennedy brought them over after we got back. He received 2 letters from Helen after she was supposed to have been murdered. That's the second. It's just a poste restante address. He thinks he must have thrown the first one away. And this is the only other thing he could find in her hand. It's a list of bulbs or something for planting.
Oh, yes, that's obviously what it is.
The handwriting looks the same to me, but, well, I'm not an expert.
Well, neither am I, but I have a friend, Sir Henry Clithering, who would know the right Home Office department.
Well, that's splendid, because it seems to me that...
Yes, Charles?
Well, it seems to me that we're looking for X. That's what you called him. Someone who fell in love with your stepmother and strangled her in a fit of jealousy. Well, we can guess what kind of girl she was.
Man mad.
But we don't know anything about her lovers.
Oh, yes, but I think we do, if you'll forgive me. You see, there was the man she was going out to India to marry, for example.
Of course, the solicitor chap. Now, what was his name?
Walter Fane. I'm having tea with his mother on Thursday.
Good heavens, Miss Marple. How did you manage that?
Well, I think I mentioned I have friends who have friends here.
Oh, and then there was another man. Someone she got mixed up with when she was very young. Most unsuitable, Dr. Kennedy said. I wonder why. So that's 2.
I think we may infer a third.
Why do you say that?
Well, she was going out to India to marry Walter Fane, and as soon as she got there, she changed her mind. Now, why?
Something girls do.
Well, under certain circumstances.
Something he did?
Of course. She met someone else on the boat going out.
Propinquity.
Moonlight on the boat deck. And yet she didn't marry him. I'm being stupid. He was married already.
Exactly.
It's what my father said. I knew from the very first there was someone else. We've got to trace all her lovers and question them to find the guilty one.
Yes, I think that's all quite clear, Mrs. Reed. When would you like to come in and sign the will?
Any time. We live quite close, Mr. Fane.
Oh, yes, you gave me your address.
Hillside. I think it used to be called St. Catherine's.
Oh, yes. On the Leehampton Road. Oh, shall we say Monday next at 10 a.m.?
Yes, that'll be perfect. You know, I actually chose to come to you because I think, well, I believe you once knew my mother.
Really? What was her name?
Halliday. Megan Halliday. I think I was told you were once engaged to her.
Oh, no, I never knew your mother, Mrs. Reed. But I was once engaged briefly to Helen Kennedy, who married your father as his second wife.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry, I've got it all wrong. It was my stepmother. I knew it was something to do with India, so I thought it was my own mother.
Helen Kennedy came out to India to marry me, but then she changed her mind. On the boat going home, she met your father after your mother's death.
Have I put my foot in it?
Oh, it was 20 years ago, Mrs. Reed. Time enough. You know, I suppose, that your father and Helen actually lived in your house in Dilmouth for quite a while.
Yes. That's one of the reasons we came. It was fantastic to find it for sale.
Yes. I remember it very well. You may not remember me, but I suppose I must have seen you as a little girl.
I was only about 2 or 3. Were you on leave from India or something like that?
No, I chucked India for good. I'd passed all my law exams, so I came back here to my father's firm. I've been here ever since. Yes, ever since. You must come and have tea with my mother one day and bring your husband.
Thanks.
Next Monday, then, 10 o'clock.
Goodbye, Mr. Vane.
Well?
He was here in Dilmouth at the right time. He couldn't possibly have done it.
Why not?
Too mild and ordinary. A sort of nothing.
Those are just the sort that do.
What?
Commit murders, darling.
Yes, I suppose. When I first mentioned the house, perhaps he was crazy about her. Oh, look, there's Miss Marple. I wonder what she's up to.
Holiday shopping? Well, she's not going to find out very much doing that.
There we are, madam. Comfy wear of summer vests. 2, you said. Yes. I think you'll find they're in your size.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's quite correct. Thank you. Not that we've had much summer this year, have we? The last time I stayed in Dilmouth, it was glorious weather. But that, of course, was 20 years ago.
Yes, madam.
Yes, I was staying with friends in a house on the Leahampton Road, St. Catherine's. Perhaps you know it.
Oh, indeed I do, madam. That would have been in Mrs. Finderson's time.
Well, the people I knew had it furnished. A Major Halliday and his wife and baby daughter.
Is there anything else I can do for you today, madam?
No, thank you. Just the best.
That'll be 8 and 10 pence, please, madam.
Yes, of course. Yes. Here we are. The Hallidays had a very good cook. She gave me a wonderful recipe for baked apple pudding and another, as I recall, for gingerbread. I wonder what became of her.
That would be Edith Paget, madam. She's still in Dilmouth.
Oh, really? How interesting.
For a change, madam.
Thank you. You know, I always felt very sorry for Major Halliday, because I believe his young wife left him for someone else in the end.
Yes, madam.
The doctor's sister, wasn't she?
Yes, madam. Poor Dr. Kennedy. He was such a nice man. As for his sister, I don't know what became of her. Nobody ever speaks of her.
No, quite.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I suppose you don't know how I could get in touch with Edith Paget, do you?
I dare say I do, madam.
Oh, how kind. Because I've lost that recipe, and I'm really rather fond of gingerbread.
Lord bless us. Little Miss Granny, is it? Oh, fancy now. Come in.
Do you remember me, Miss Paget?
Well, of course I do. Well, you must call me Edie like you used to. Sit yourselves down now. Oh, many's the game Lily and I used to have with you. Lily was housemaid here, Lily Abbott. Young girl, pert in her ways. You must excuse me running on like this, sir. Talking brings the old days back. Your friend, Miss Maypole, the lady is called. She said you wanted to ask me something.
About the old days. You see, I was brought up in New Zealand, so I don't know anything about my life here with my father and stepmother.
Oh, very fond of you, she was. Used to take you down the beach, play with you in the garden. Nothing more than a girl herself, really.
And you liked her?
Yes, madam, I did. No matter what anybody said. I'd never believed she'd do what she did do. Though, mind you, there had been talk.
Do you have any idea who it was she went away with?
Well, sir, we had our suspicions. Well, Lily did. She was a silly girl, mind you. That chap's sweet on her, Edie, she used to say. And Dewey's wife looked daggers.
Who was that?
Well, now, I don't just remember the name. Colonel Esdale Astley, was it? No. They were staying at the Royal Clarence, him and his wife.
Summer visitors?
But I rather think he, or maybe both of them, had known Mrs. Halliday before.
Were they still here when my stepmother, went away?
Well, I think they went a day or two after. Anyway, it was close enough to make people talk. They come from up north somewhere. Northumberland, I think it were.
She was afraid of something, wasn't she?
Afraid?
Yes.
Oh, no. It's funny you should say that. I remember Lily coming in one day. She'd been dusting the stairs. Ructions, she said. She'd a common way of talking sometimes. She'd heard the master and the mistress in the drawing room. I'm afraid of you. That's what Mrs. Halliday said. And she sounded scared too. I've been afraid of you for a long time. You're not normal. Go away and leave me alone, something of that kind. And Lily took it very seriously. So when it happened... Oh, I don't know what I mean at all, telling you all this.
It's important, Edie. We have to know.
Well, the plain fact is, Miss Granny, Lily left you alone that night and went off the pictures. I didn't know nothing about it, otherwise I'd have been keeping an eye on you. I was doing some ironing. And you can't hear a thing in that kitchen when the baize door's shut.
Oh, good evening, Edith.
Oh, good evening, sir. Anything wrong, sir?
Oh, I was looking for Lily. Major Halliday wants a word with her.
Oh, I do think Lily went upstairs, sir. She said she had a headache going on 2 hours since.
She's not in her room. Of course, if she's not well. Oh.
Hello. Good evening, sir. Good gracious, Lily. Where'd you spring from?
Oh, I'd just come down to get a glass of water for an aspirin. I thought maybe you'd gone up to see to Miss Gwenny. Is there anything I can do, sir?
I'd like you to come with me, Lily. Major Halliday and I are puzzled about your mistress. She doesn't appear to be at home. We were hoping you might help us.
Oh, she said after dinner, sir, she was going for a walk.
We'd like you to look round her room. Thank you, Edith.
Edie! Oh, my stars, whatever next?
Never mind about that.
Oh, you'll never guess what's happened now.
What?
She's upped it, that's what.
Oh.
Oh, the mistress, who else? Dr. Kennedy took me up to her room, wanted to know if she'd taken any clothes with her and what.
Never. Ever made him think of that?
Oh, she's left a note. Gone off with someone. Oh, the master's all in. A more fool he ought to have seen it coming.
You've no right to speak like that.
And why not? Didn't I tell you? Well, it's not likely to be Mr. Soberside's Fane, for all he follows her around like a dog.
You think it's that colonel, then?
That's my bet. Unless it's our mystery man in the flashy car. Look here. It's all wrong.
What's wrong?
Them clothes. I went through them all because the doctor asked me, and there's enough gone. But they're the wrong things.
Whatever do you mean?
She took an evening dress, but she didn't take the belt, nor the slip, nor the shoes that goes with it. And she took her green tweed, which she never wears till autumn, but But she didn't take that fancy pullover, and the undies too. Now, they was a job lot. No, you mark my words, she hasn't got away at all. The master's done her in.
Oh, Lily.
Remember, she was scared to death of him. Didn't I tell you I heard her say so?
Well, that's just where you're wrong, 'cause 'twasn't the master at all. Just after you told me, I looked through the window and I seen the master coming down the hill with his golf clubs. So 'twasn't him with the mistress in the drawing room. It was someone else.
Someone else?
That'll be the house up there, Anstall Manor. You see it on the map?
Yes, that must be it. But are you sure it's the right place?
It better be. Hell of a long way to come, Northumberland, on a wild goose chase. Colonel and Mrs. Erskine Anstall Manor Dane. They were the only military couple in the Royal Clarence's guest book for that particular August.
And Edie did say they were from Northumberland.
Oh, it's bound to be them. The only question is, will they rise to the bait?
What happens now?
We run out of water, darling. Let's hope the Erskines are feeling hospitable. It is tea time, after all.
No, come in. It's nice to have unexpected visitors. Let's join us for some tea. Life's pretty bleak up here. No labourers to speak of.
It's very good of you. We only asked for a jug of water.
Dear. What a beautiful place. How old is the house?
It's Tudor. Crumbling at the edges, rather.
My husband's people have lived here for nearly 300 years.
I take it you're from Australia, Mrs. Reed?
No, New Zealand.
Ah, really?
But Giles is from Devon.
Oh? What part is that?
I was born in Plymouth, but we've actually just bought a house in Dilmouth.
Dilmouth?
Yes. Do you know it?
We spent a few weeks there, many years ago. Rather a pretty little place. Remember, Richard?
Yes, very well. Do sit down, please.
Thank you.
Yes, we stayed at the Royal George. No, the Royal Clarence, wasn't it? Still there, I suppose?
Yes, it is.
Our house is quite near. It's called Hillside. I think it used to be called... What was it, Giles?
St. Catherine's.
You've had tea. If you have time, perhaps you'd like to see the garden.
Do you think you'll be able to find it again?
I hope so. It's a pair you gave me to match my pussycat eyes, so you said. Did you see the way she was looking at me all the time? There's something very nasty about that woman, almost sinister. I bet she gives him hell.
When are you thinking of tackling him again?
Tomorrow morning. She goes shopping in Dyfe.
How do you know that?
He mentioned it when we were in the garden. I think he's rather nice. Not the strangling type at all. I'm sorry to be such a nuisance, but I thought it was worth a try. I know I had it on when we came out from tea.
I suppose you can't remember when you first...
Fiddle with them. That's how I lose them. Oh, look, there it is. Just there.
So it is. You've got sharp eyes, Mrs. Reed.
Oh, I knew it was here somewhere. Thanks so much. Actually, I've got a confession. I wanted to talk to you alone, and this seemed the only way. There's something I've got to know, and I think you're the only person who can tell me.
Oh, what was that?
I think you were once in love with my stepmother, Helen Kennedy. Helen Halliday she became when she married my father. Were you? I'm sorry I cheated.
All's fair, they say. I suppose there were letters. Women never destroy those, do they? Why did you want to know?
I want to know more about her. I was only a small child when she went away.
She went away.
She left Dilmouth that summer and never came back. Didn't you know?
No, I didn't know that. There was a brother, a doctor.
He doesn't know anything. Everyone thinks she ran away with someone.
And you thought that was me? No such luck, I'm afraid. It all happened on the boat going out to India. One of the kids had been ill and my wife was going to follow later. Helen and I just fell hopelessly in love. Hopeless because she was going out to marry someone else. It was rather a desperate decision because she wasn't happy at home and wanted to get away. Hopeless for me too, of course, with a wife and 2 children.
Yes, I see.
In fact, she didn't marry him. She went back home and met this other man. Your father, I suppose. 8 months later, my father died and I came into this place. I sent in my papers and went back to England. My wife said she wanted a holiday while we were waiting to move into this house, so I said, what about Dilmouth? She knew nothing, of course.
You wanted to see Helen again?
So I thought. It was a mistake. Janet's a jealous woman. Always has been.
When did you last see Helen?
The night before we left. We met on the beach. And I walked with her back to the house.
What time was this?
About 9 o'clock. It was getting dark. We said goodbye.
Was that a Saturday? August the 21st?
Could have been. Yes, it was. Because my wife was afraid the roads would be crowded.
Helen left on the Friday, the night before.
Not because of me.
Was she afraid of anyone? My father, was he a jealous man?
Why should he be? I was jealous of him. Unless, of course, there was someone else. Jealous is a bloody awful thing. I know. I'll do the talking. Mrs. Reed had to come back, Janet. She lost an earring in the garden yesterday.
Really? Did you find it again?
Yes, thanks. I was lucky. Thank you so much. I must go. We're leaving the hotel today.
I'll see you to your car.
Sorry, Richard. It was a very important call.
Oh, that's quite all right. Please don't bother. Thanks again for everything.
Leave it or not?
You arranged it with the girl. I saw the way you were treating her.
For God's sake, Janet.
Marriage, as we all know, Miss Marple, can be very difficult. In this case, it would have been disastrous.
My poor Walter. The girl was quite unsuitable.
Really, Mrs. Vane?
Oh, I don't mean she was an actress or anything like that. She was the local doctor's sister. More like his daughter, really. Years younger. Poor man had no idea how to bring her up. Got herself entangled first with a young man at the office. Bad lot. They had to get rid of him.
Oh, how was that?
Oh, some confidential matter. Anyway, this girl, Helen Kennedy, was, I suppose, very pretty, but I didn't think so. I always thought her hair was touched up. But Walter proposed, and she refused him. That's why he went to Assam, or was it Burma? And what do you think?
The moment he'd gone, the silly girl changes her mind and says she wants to marry him.
Oh, dear me.
So she books a passage, sets sail, and what do you think the next move is?
Well, I can't imagine.
Has a love affair on the boat going out with a married man, would you believe? So, there was Walter on the quay to meet her, and the first thing she does is to say she can't marry him after all. Now, don't you think that's a wicked thing to do?
Oh, most distressing. Well, it might have quite unhinged him.
Oh, Walter has always had the most wonderful self-control.
And what happened to the young girl, Miss Kennedy?
Oh, she came home, had another affair on the way back, and this time married the man. They settled down here at the other end of the town, next to the old hospital. It didn't last, of course. Within a year, she'd gone off with some married man.
What a lucky escape for your son.
Oh, that's just what I told him.
Yes. And the first young man with whom she became entangled in your son's office?
Oh, did very well for himself. Runs those coach tours. Affleck's daffodil coaches, bright yellow things.
Affleck?
Jackie Affleck. Nasty, pushing fellow. Oh, there you are, Walter. He's usually back about this time.
Hello, Mother.
This is Miss Marple. She's a friend of Dolly Bantry.
Oh, how do you do?
I'm quite well, thank you.
Now that you're home, Walter, we must have some fresh tea.
No, don't bother, Mother.
Of course we shall, dear. And more scones.
My mother spoils me, I'm afraid.
It's all still a mystery. Walter Fane was just boring. And poor Colonel Erskine.
2 down and 1 to find. Let's hope Miss Marple's made some progress.
If only there was some way we could trace Lily Abbott. Oh, it's hopeless. We don't even know if she's still alive.
Dear Dr. Kennedy, I hope you can help me about the enclosed. Do you think it means money or a reward? Because I could do with the money, I'm sure. I often have been thinking about the night Mrs. Halliday went away. And I don't think, sir, she ever did because of what I saw out the window. That posh car, too, what I seen before. I saw before. I wouldn't like to do anything without seeing you, because I never have been mixed up with the police, and Mr. Kimball wouldn't like it. I could come and see you, sir, next market day.
Two days a week on and off. Not at this time of year.
Oh, I so agree with Mr. Foster. That's why I felt I must come along and give a hand while Mrs. Reed's away. One can never relax with green flowers.
True enough, ma'am.
So sad. Nearly all part-time now, isn't it? I suppose you were once a full-time gardener, Mr. Foster.
Yes, I was, ma'am, when I worked over at Dr. Kennedy for him and his young sister.
Oh, Mrs. Reed's stepmother.
Ah, Miss Ellen. Pretty maid she was. Doctor set a lot of store by her. Always wanting to go somewhere. Dancing, tennis. Funny thing I've always thought that was.
Oh, what was that?
On that tennis court. Someone came over in the middle of the night, cut the net to ribbons. Oh, nasty bit of spite, you might say.
But who would ever want to do a thing like that?
That's what the doctor wanted to know. Said he weren't going to get another. For if 'tis spite one time, 'twill be spite again. Rare and put out Miss Ellen was. Didn't have no luck. First that net, then her foot.
Well, what happened to her foot?
Oh, tripped and fell. No more than a graze, but it wouldn't heal. Doctor was fair worried. Yeah, dressing it, treating it. Poor maid was there with her foot up. No more dancing or tennis for her that year.
And was that the year she broke off her engagement to Mr. Affleck?
Bit of nonsense that was.
Yes, but somebody must have felt spiteful towards Miss Helen.
Some of the young ladies might have done, but Jackie Affleck was too sharp by half. Cut themselves in the end, that sort do. Yeah, it didn't last here long, and good riddance, I say. Us and don't want the likes of he in Dilmouth. Yeah. Let her go and be smart somewhere else.
Ah, Mrs. Cook.
Oh, Dr. Kennedy.
I'm sorry if I startled you. Just be careful with that old trouble of yours. How are you keeping?
Oh, pretty fair, thank you, Doctor.
You must take it easy. I was looking for Mr. and Mrs. Reed. Did I see someone in the garden?
Good morning. Morning, Foster.
Morning, Doctor.
Oh, I'm Dr. Kennedy.
Oh, how do you do? Such nasty stinging stuff, this, but it does kill the green fly. Jane Marple.
How do you do?
I'm so sorry, but I'm afraid Mr. and Mrs. Reed are away.
So I learned from Mrs. Cocker. I have a letter here. Will interest them.
Oh, is it from Lily?
I see you're in their confidence.
Well, they did ask my advice, but I'm afraid young people seldom take advice.
Yeah, that's true. I'm fond of Gwenny. She was a nice wee child. I'm afraid she's heading for trouble. What did you tell her?
To let sleeping murder lie. If it was murder.
Seems incredible to me I haven't heard from Helen in all these years. Equally strange if she's dead that I've not been notified.
You were very fond of her.
Why? I can still see her in this garden. In the short time she was here, she grew to love it very much. Would you give this letter to Giles? I've answered it. I'll be seeing Lily next Thursday. Perhaps they'll join me at my house for tea.
I'll see they get it directly they come home. Yes. How very interesting.
But that's all wonderful. We've heard from Lily, and you found the third man, the awful Affleck.
You're a genius, Miss Marple.
Oh, my dear boy.
And we've got news for you.
This arrived this morning. It's your Home Office chap's report on the handwriting samples.
Oh. And he says the letter and Helen's list are in the same hand.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. Why do you say that?
Jealousy. Cruel as the grave. And the coals thereof are coals of fire.
Yes. As Mrs. Erskine must know.
Well, here's all the details of our coaches, Mr. Reed. Should be something for your boys' club there. You just make your mind up what you want, and we'll oblige.
Thanks.
And, what was this other business you said you wanted to discuss?
Well...
It's really a private matter, Mr. Affleck. We're trying to trace a relation of mine, and we think you might have known her.
Oh, really? What was the lady's name?
Helen Halliday. Before she married my father, she was Helen Kennedy.
It was a long time ago, Mrs. Reed. So what's the trouble? A quarrel? Left home? What is it, money?
She went away one night, a few years before the war. No one knows where she is.
Now the hang should I?
We heard you were friendly once.
Fat chance of that. Doesn't her brother know where she is?
He had 2 letters from her, but no address.
A regular little mystery, then. You could advertise.
We have.
No luck there?
No.
Maybe she's dead. Lovely girl she was, too.
What did you really feel about her, Mr. Affleck?
Now, there's a question. I'll be honest with you, Mrs. Reed. I felt sorry for the kid.
Sorry?
Just that. With that brother of hers, she had no fun at all.
You didn't like Dr. Kennedy, did you? Was he responsible for you losing your job?
Oh, you know about that, do you? Yes. Yes, I was fired from Fane and Watchman's. I've naught to hide. Dirty work it was. And I know who was responsible. But it wasn't Dr. Kennedy. So I can't help you, I'm afraid. I had a bit of fun with Helen, and that's all it was.
But you saw her again, after she was married.
Did I? Maybe I did, a couple of times. Now, if you good people will excuse me, just let me know what you want. 24 or 32-seater, and we'll oblige.
think this is his.
It must be. A yellow peril. Isn't it horrible? Remember what Lily said in her letter about a posh car?
And Edie. The mystery man in the flashy car.
I wonder what Lily's going to tell us this afternoon at Dr. Kennedy's. Do you think she really knows?
Admiring my bus. Little Buttercup, I call her. I chose daffodils for the coaches, so that all fits. It's just my fancy. It's a nice spot of weather. I think I'll take it for a spin.
Good day, Jill.
Damn. Do you think he heard?
I hope not.
A surprise. What are you doing here then? No! No!
I gave explicit directions. They were very simple. Only a few minutes' walk up the road. More likely she decided not to come at all. Perhaps her husband stepped in. These country folk are incalculable. I wonder what she could have told us in any case. Probably nothing that really matters, if Helen is alive or dead. If what she thinks is true, those letters to me were forgeries. You know, I've been thinking a lot about her lately.
Helen?
Who could have killed her? She had no enemies. Here's a photograph. For many, many years, I hadn't thought about her at all. Now I think about her all the time. It's your doing.
No. No, I think it's her.
What do you mean?
Just that. I can't explain it. It's not us. It's Helen herself.
Any news?
Yes, well, I'm afraid it is murder. Lily Kimball's body was found by a passing holiday-maker in the woods near the railway lines at Matching's Halt.
Matching's Halt? That's the station before. She should have gone to Woodley Bolton. I said in my letter.
Yes. We found your letter in her handbag, Dr. Kennedy. Was Mrs. Kimball a patient of yours?
Not for 20 years.
You advised her to take the 3:30 train from Coombe Lee and to get out at Woodley Bolton. Well, she must have taken a train 2 hours before, because her body was found about 3 o'clock. She'd been strangled. You say you expect her at your house for tea?
Aye, at 4 o'clock.
Then what happened?
Well, the most likely explanation is she agreed to meet somebody else. Then continue her journey by the later train. Have you any idea who that might have been?
It's possible.
Yes, Mrs. Reed?
I think my wife feels that you should question a man called Jackie Affleck.
Daffodil Coaches.
Very well. Now, is there anything else you think you ought to tell me? If Mrs. Kimball wasn't a patient of yours, Dr. Kennedy, what was the purpose of her visit today? And did that also concern Mr. and Mrs. Reed?
Yes, it did.
It's hard to explain. I suppose it all started when I went to see a play in London, The Duchess of Malfi.
Why are they digging in that spot?
Well, that was my idea. You remember when you first saw this house, you were struck by the fact that this window had no view to the sea. And then Foster found the old steps under the shrubs.
Yes. It's one of the things that made me think I'd been here before.
But it seemed to me that somebody wanted to dig new steps, so they covered up the old ones. And when anything new is dug...
Then it was my father. It must have been my father. Who else could have done that?
Oh, I don't think we must jump to conclusions. Not just yet.
You need a drink, darling. Miss Marple.
Oh, thank you. No, I think Mrs. Cocker is making tea.
Well, I need something a little stronger. It was one of three people. Walter Fane, Erskine, or Jackie Affleck. And whoever it was murdered Lily this afternoon. Presumably the inspector is checking alibis.
Well, it can't be Colonel Erskine. He's in Northumberland.
Of course. Well, that's one we can check up on.
What you gonna do?
I took their number. Yes, here it is.
No, it's not urgent, Mrs. Fane. I'll telephone his office in the morning. Thank you. Goodbye.
All three of them on the loose.
Mr. Affleck?
Him too. We saw him set off in his car. They could all have met Lily off that train.
Here's your tea.
Thank you, Mrs. Cocker. Could you put it there? I'm sorry we're keeping you up so late.
Oh, I done some sandwiches for you. And I suppose the gentleman in the garden will be wanting a bite pretty soon. I couldn't walk out on you, madam. Not with all this to-do going on.
Excuse me, Mrs. Reed.
Yes, Inspector?
I'm sorry, Granny. Miss Marple was right. We found what we were looking for.
What is it? I knew it. I saw what I was taken. Oh,
it's all right, Mrs. Cocker.
Oh, my life.
Dr. Kennedy is here.
Please
Sit
forgive
back.
me.
You know this old trouble, don't you?
Yes.
You'll be all right. Will you warn the hospital we're on our way?
Yes, Miss Marple.
Well, it's just that it is rather important.
You better tell me, Miss Marple.
Yes, and I'm rather worried. I'm rather confiding. You see,
Hello, Gwenda.
Hello, darling.
I'm at the hospital. Mrs. Cocker's fine.
Have they seen her?
Yes. They're keeping her in for observation. Dr. Kennedy's gone now, so I'm going round to her place to collect some things.
How long will you be?
Oh, I don't know. About an hour.
Then I'll get the dinner on.
All right, marvellous, thanks. Love you.
Love you. Bye. Hello? Who is it?
Hello, Granny. I came from the hospital. Mrs. Cocker's going to be fine.
Yes, I know. Giles just phoned. Why have you come?
I wanted to see you. Just as you were that night. A little girl standing on the stairs, the way you remembered it. I watched Helen come home. I saw her from the hospital window. In those days, it was just across the road. She was with a man, Richard Erskine. I knew she was in love with him, planning to run away. And I should lose her. Because you see, Granny, I couldn't bear that.
It was you. You I saw.
It was the wee girl, as Helen was once. I didn't want to do her any harm. Just hold her close, tight, and safe. With her golden hair. The death of young ones is never to be pitied. Cover her face. My eyes are dazzled, Granny. I don't want to lose you. Oh, my darling. My dearest sister.
Miss Marple.
Oh, you didn't think I'd leave you alone, did you? Of course, there were so many things that pointed to him, but most of all, he was at the right place at the right time. And then, you know, there were those signs of those terrible possessive madness. The damaged tennis net and the graze that wouldn't heal while he was treating it.
We thought Helen was almost a nymphomaniac.
Well, that's because Dr. Kennedy told you so.
All she wanted was to get away. Remember Jackie Affleck said he was sorry for the kid? And then there was Lily.
Oh, poor Lily. Dr. Kennedy didn't know that she was at the pictures that evening of the murder. He thought that she knew the truth and had sent him a blackmail letter. His car must have been outside the hospital on that evening, and he thought she'd spotted him walking to the house.
A posh car. I'd seen it before. So he wrote her a letter telling her to catch an earlier train and get out at Matching's Halt. All he had to do then was exchange that letter for the one the police found in her bag after he'd killed her.
Yes.
And, of course, Helen's letter from abroad and the sample of handwriting he gave us were both by him.
So, of course, they looked the same.
Why didn't we think of that?
Because you believed what he told you. It's very dangerous to believe people. I haven't for years. But really, the most wicked thing was the way he deluded your poor father. Using drugs to induce hallucinations and involving an innocent man in his own fearful fantasies of strangling and domination. Yet part of his mind was very cool and calculating. Even persuading your father to make changes so that Helen's grave was already dug. Such wickedness. And I blame myself that I didn't see it all at once. It was the play, you see. Cover her face. Those are words spoken by a brother who's just contrived his sister's death.
Poor Helen, who died young. I hope she's really sleeping now. I think she is.
Well, now, my dears, have you thought any more about the new rose beds?
Well, we wanted your advice.
Well, I always think the old and trusted are best, you know. They bring out so many new